Hi, I'm Valerie Small.
And I'm Walter Santiago.
And we are Next Phase.
Next Steps. First of all, welcome, right?
Welcome
to our podcast. This is our first podcast, and we are extremely, well, I know I'm excited.
Yes.
And slightly nervous because, and I'm nervous not because I'm nervous about doing it. I am nervous because I'm excited.
Yes.
And I always get nervous for the things that I care mostly about.
Me too.
And this is something that I am extremely passionate about.
So am I.
So Valerie, how do you feel about this?
I feel great, Walter. I feel great. I'm excited like you. And you always talking about we're the 55 plus. And you said something earlier, Walter, that was great. And
this was 55 years in the making.
55 years in the making.
Yeah.
And my response to you was, what do people consider to be success?
Wow. Yeah.
What does success look like? Success for me is not something that happens overnight. Success is a journey.
Yeah.
And it was a journey of 55 plus years.
Wow. Yeah.
And when you said that, it really triggered so many things. That's why I said to you, remember the summers growing up. Remember the junior high school. We have so many memories.
Yep.
Okay.
Which we'll share throughout other podcasts and this one as well.
Yeah, this as well.
You know what's interesting? You look at those 55 years in the making.
Oh God.
Which is a lot of years, right? It's just kind of crazy. But you asked the question, how do you measure success? For me, our relationship is a success.
Wow.
Right? Because that outside of the financial benefits and whatever those are, but the fact, Valerie, that you and I, 55 years later. Are still talking, and we still love each other.
Yes.
And we still and we wanted to create this podcast, which it for me it's monumental.
Yes,
truly.
it is. It is. And Walter, you said something very, really great, and I really hope I don't get emotional on this first podcast. But you said something that we love each other. Love is the foundation of everything. Yeah. And we met in first grade, Mrs. Hargrave.
Oh my God.
And you were a pain in the butt then. You're a pain in the butt now. But there's the component of the foundation of love, and that's where we start. Yeah, Walter, that's very, very important.
But you know what? I mean, you have love, yes, but then you have a mutual respect.
Yes.
And that to me is huge.
Yes.
And which unfortunately you don't. Even if love didn't exist, and I'm not talking about us, but in general, but yet people would have a fondness or a respect towards the individual, I truly think things would be totally different.
So do I.
But so 55 years. So for those of you that haven't seen some of the promos, right? Valerie and I met, I believe the year was 1969. It was September of 1969.
Oh my God.
And we were first graders at a school in Bushwick in Brooklyn called PS 45.
PS 45.
And if there are any PS 45ers out there, shout out to them.
Yeah.
And it was, for me personally, it was an amazing experience. And I will tell you one thing that I thought about this past week, especially after what happened down in Atlanta.
Oh.
One of the things about going to school for us was that school was a safe haven.
Yes, it was.
Never in my entire life did I ever worry about absolutely anything.
Nothing.
And today, unfortunately, I have a daughter who teaches K through 6, and I have a wife who also taught. And the amount of, for them, anxiety that they have it's just so different. And for us, PS 45.
That's right.
And we'll talk a lot about PS 45.
That's right.
Because I think for me was what begun to allow me to find my voice.
That's exact. You are 100% correct. And the first grade teacher, Mrs. Hargrave, she was really something. And God bless her, because I know she's probably not with us now.
Yeah, well, she was old back then to us, right?
Right, exactly. So back then, Walter, she laid the foundation for us. You know what? And one of our podcasts, we're going to have to talk about some personal things, you know, showing up to work, being ready, being prepared. She used to tell us, and she used to ask us, did you brush your teeth this morning?
Or did you not brush your hair for a reason?
Did you not brush your hair? So, you know, just those basic things. And, you know, if we have a teacher that would say that now, and I think they would get in trouble.
Right. Oh, my gosh,
I think
absolutely.
that it worked for us because that's what we needed.
Yeah.
In addition to that, moving on to Mr. Wilbeck, the 5th and 6th grade, he too had introduced us to socialization skills.
Yeah.
And he took us outside of our community.
Yeah,
Right?
he actually took
really
us
did.
to areas that I think I would never have known about or inspired to.
Okay, that's okay.
If it wasn't because of him. And I know that we're going to have a lot of conversations, but Mr. Roger Wilbeck was our fifth grade school teacher, and then after we finished the 5th grade, for some odd reason, found a way of taking the class again and becoming our 6th grade teacher.
Well, Walter, but listen to this.
How does that even happen?
Well, it's the same way that our former mayor one of the mayors served 2 terms, shifted the law.
Right.
And he served 3 terms and then shifted back. So our Mr. Wilbeck shifted whatever he did.
Yeah.
And he moved that so that we could be a cohort together.
Yeah, he was way ahead of us.
He was way ahead of it.
Yeah.
And that's what came to me, that our former mayor, one of our former mayors did that, but he's late. Because Mr. Roger Wilbeck did that in when? 1970 something?
This was 1975, 74.
Okay.
Which is actually, you know, so being that we're talking about Roger Wilbeck, he was, for many of us, he was a father figure.
Yes, he
right?
was. Yes, he was.
He used to take us to his home in the Catskills, right?
Yes,
I believe it was the Catskills.
That's exactly right.
And he used to bring all of us there and basically taught us about nature. He would introduce us to the Brooklyn Botanical Garden, right? And we all had our little plot that we used to cultivate.
Yes, that's exactly correct.
And interestingly enough, for Valerie and I, there were friends that we met in his class that to today,
yes,
they are actually major part of our lives.
Our lives, that's exactly right. So we're still in communication. So Walter, you know, you asked me that question about the first.
How do you feel, right?
Yeah.
How do you feel? How do you feel about this?
How do I feel about this first podcast?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Walter, I liken it to the first night of marriage.
Oh gosh.
You just don't know what to expect.
My God.
So, you know, Walter, I don't know what to expect.
You know, to be used in her bedroom comment scares me. However, we don't know. You know, this is so why did Valerie and I do this? We are doing this because we have reached a level of success that we feel is now valuable to share and teach others.
Yes.
And our total intent is to make life better for you. That is our total intent.
That's right.
This is nothing this is not tied to sponsors, it's not tied to anything but you.
But you. And I like that. It's one of our ways to give back.
Yeah.
And how can we use our life journey, you know, our life cycles, because it's what, next phase, next step, life cycles. How can we take the life cycles that we have journeyed through and, Walter, share those with others? It hasn't always been, you know, ice cream and chocolate, right, you know, or pizza and candy or whatever you want to call it, or easy. It has been some hiccups.
Yep.
Because
for sure.
I personally, and I can't wait till we get to the podcast about being fired.
Oh, yeah.
You know how many times I was fired? It's amazing.
Right.
And
Which you're hearing a lot of that now.
and we hear,
Lots.
okay, and,
Yeah.
and you were talking about that this morning about the layoffs
Yeah,
and the
yeah.
unemployment. How are these individuals building their ladder
Yeah.
or recreating themselves, Walter?
You know what, Valerie? I'm glad you mentioned that
Mm-hmm.
because why we call this podcast Next Phase, Next Steps?
Mm-hmm.
Because every next phase causes a major pivot, right? It's getting fired for me would be a major pivot, and meaning that it's a major change,
Yes,
right?
yes,
And why do
yes.
we call it steps? Because after that pivot, you need to take steps to almost transform yourself,
Oh,
right?
yes, yes.
And I think well, not I think that's why Valerie and I are doing this. So what are some of the topics you might be hearing
Yes, what are-
moving forward, just so they could start getting a feel
Yes, yes.
of what we're looking to accomplish.
Okay.
What might some be, Valerie?
Well, the one that I just said, Walter, was life after being fired.
Yep.
Okay. And Walter, let me just add this, and let's let our audience know, our listeners know, that that's rejection.
Yeah, totally.
And dealing with rejection, Walter, is a serious thing because rejection leads to other things.
Absolutely.
If we don't handle it or deal with it immediately.
Yeah, and just to sort of piggyback off of that, one of the other podcasts that you'll hear is not so much the rejection or the being fired, but the dealing with individuals that unfortunately are not present or are just not kind. And there are things that we as the person dealing with these individuals can do. And we're going to talk about that. And there's also things that the organizations that employ these individuals can do. And our job is going to be not to expose anybody,
Right.
but at least to provide some content that can be some steps that they can take in order to minimize some of that impact.
Okay.
Because I will tell you, it's huge.
Okay, so Walter, two things you said. See, you said the organizations who hire these individuals. So that means that when you said that just now, I started to think. There are institutions, agencies, corporations, companies who are hiring these types of individuals. One. So that means that there's a strong possibility that some of these individuals are in leadership positions.
Oh, without a doubt. But I will tell you though,
Okay.
it's not even so much that they hire them. And it's not so much that these individuals, and of course, this is going to be a conversation with more details. But it's not that the individuals come in this way. It's that they're not either developed
Wow.
or that day was just a bad day. And it does happen, because it happens to me,
Okay.
right?
Yes.
And it definitely happens. So part of what we want to do is we want to, what is it that you always say? We want to unpack, right?
These situations.
We want to unpack. I just
all
love
of
that.
this.
Yeah,
Wait
yeah.
a minute, Walter, but you said something again. You're talking about they're not, we said something earlier about being kind.
Yeah.
And Walter, we just need to touch upon that one more time.
Yeah,
That needs to be a review.
yeah.
I asked you, is it my responsibility and should I be on,
Yeah.
O-N, on all the time?
Yeah.
Because you have to understand this, Walter. It's not just for agency, institutions, corporations, companies. We could even take it to the church.
Yeah.
That I'm talking about being on all the time.
Being an athlete.
Athlete, the sport, everyone. Are we supposed to be on in these leadership roles all the time?
Yeah.
And your response?
Yeah, first of all, that's a really good question because that's a question that's constantly asked. And I work with many organizations and I work with many students and et cetera, et cetera. And my answer is you don't have to always be on, but you should always be kind. And let's define what I mean by kind.
Thank you. Would you please?
What I mean by kind is be respectful. Listen to the individual. Be present.
Okay.
Right? Be present. And I always use, whenever I use the word kind, I like to tell people that you need to be interesting and you need to be interested. Right?
Okay.
Now, if you can't be neither one of those, then just be kind. And all you need to do about being kind is show as if you care, be respectful, and if you don't show up.
Wow.
Right? So that's you know, we're going to talk a lot about these things. And I think, and it also applies to those folks that are listening to us that are working with their clients.
Yes.
It applies to the clients working with their family members. It applies to the corporations working with their employees.
Wow.
It even applies, believe it or not, to family member dealing with family member
Oh boy.
or friend dealing with a friend.
That's right.
Because you know what? If you can't be kind, don't show up. Don't be part of the conversation.
Well, Walter, let me share with you. You're saying don't show up, but even when they show up, they're not really showing up because they're not practicing being kind.
Yeah, yeah.
So they're right. You know, is this cliche?
So then
saying,
you as the person
right.
that they're not being kind to, then you need to understand that your conversation needs to be cut short. Because it is not your job to constantly having to sell people that are not present. You know, it's interesting. I have a niece of mine who shared something with me a few weeks ago. Okay. And I found it very, very telling. She said, "We can't be." What was the word she used? It's not replaceable. When you we
not disposable.
Thank you.
Ooh,
that's the term she
disposable.
used. She used the word dispose. She says we should not be disposable, meaning that when they're done with us, they throw us out. And then all of a sudden they need us again and they bring us back. And then when they're done with us, they throw us out. And I thought, and you know, it's funny, just to give her a shout out.
Okay.
I actually told her, I said, that's going to be part of a podcast.
Wow.
And she said, oh, make sure you let me know. But that word disposable has so much weight, especially for the individuals that are treating people that way.
Well, Walter, I'm glad you just said that because through my life journey, cycles of life, I made every effort, and it worked for me, you know, until I was having layoffs or whatever.
Sure.
But I made every effort not to be disposable. And the way I did that was I made sure that when I showed up for work, I did more and gave them more than what they were asking for.
Right, but there are times that those folks, and again, different levels, because these are employers, this could be family members, these could be friends, these could be anything, right? It's what are the expectations, right? So what I mean by disposable is that when they get what they need, they're done. So even with your employer, when he or she gets what they need, they're done.
They're done.
So the question for us needs to be, do we understand the expectations totally?
Yes.
So we can know that when we're done, we could at least start something new.
We can start something
whatever
new.
that is, right?
Okay. Walter, I love that you said that because you asked me this question in the beginning. How do I feel about the first podcast? And I shared with you, Walter, I said it's like the first night of marriage. You don't know what to expect. So if that is the case, Walter, and we better make sure that we are not disposable, I need to make sure that I'm not disposable in this marriage as well.
Absolutely. That's right.
See, so it's across the board and everything.
It's
Walter.
even, it even applies to us. But I will
Yes.
share with you though, and that's where the audience comes in, right?
Yes.
You know, provide us with topics.
Yes.
Let us
that's
know, and
true.
Valerie and I are going to provide you with an email address.
Yes.
And send some topics to us, and we'll be more than happy to cover it. You know, part of what we want to do is do something to share with you where we failed
Yes.
and how we got out of that failure.
Yes.
Right, which I will share with you. It hasn't always been as Valerie said, great.
Right.
But the one thing it has been is consistent. I've made it
My God.
consistent.
Yes. Yes.
I've fallen and I've gotten right back
That's
up.
exactly right. The resilience.
Absolutely. And you know
have
what?
to
You
be
learn more from the
resilient.
failure than you do from the successes.
That's exactly right. All of the failures that I've had in life, they were it was just teachable moments
Yes.
for me. Just very teachable. How did I not show up on some occasions? And that blame game, when I go back and I look things over, stop the blaming,
Yes,
Valerie.
yes.
You did not show up. You were not present the way you could have shown up.
Yeah.
So it's no more blame game.
Yeah, and I think just to add to that, there are individuals that when they fail, they shut down,
Yes, yeah.
and it takes them quite some time to start all over again. Use that information of the failure to first of all find out why.
Yes, right.
Because if you're going to repeat what you just did, you're going to wind up in the same situation all over again, right? So the first thing you want to find out is why. Why did you fail? What could you have done differently, right?
Yes.
And then when you start, whether it's a new relationship, which I believe you defined even coming into a new job as a
Yes.
relationship,
Yes, that's
right?
right.
When you get into that new relationship, the first thing you need to do is find out what are they expecting, how are they measuring success,
Yes, yes.
and then ask, what do you expect of me? I mean, that's really important, right?
Well, Walter, that's exactly right. What are the matrix? What is really happening here in this relationship? What is it that, like you said, what is expected of me? And if I am unable to meet that metric or those metrics, is there anything built into this relationship, the company, the corporation, where I can go and get training?
The marriage.
The marriage.
Oh, it could go on and
is
on.
there, yeah,
Yeah,
see?
yeah.
Is there anything built in to this relationship, this marriage? Because that's exactly what it is. Whether it's
Yeah.
you're there. Is there anything there? Is there any training?
Yeah.
Is there any? Would you pay for my tuition?
Yeah.
What's available to me?
Right.
To make this relationship more a win-win situation.
Which is really what we're looking for. And you know, one of the other things we were talking about, podcasts to be expected. We are going to talk about creating your own brand. We are going to be talking about one of Valerie's best topics. And again, for those of you that saw the promo, you saw the VAL, right? Which is value. How do we provide value?
Yes.
To others, right?
That's
Which I believe is really key. And then one of the other things we're going to talk about, the world is changing, and actually, I'm sorry, the world is not changing. The world has changed.
The world has changed.
And because it's changed, it's requiring us to do things differently than how we've done it in the past.
Oh, wait, Walter, no, I'm a little bit excited because you said the world is changing. Can we back up?
Sure, please.
I don't know if the world is changing. Here we go. I think the people that make up the world is changing.
Sure.
The generations,
Yep.
the life
Yep.
cycles. Remember we
Yep.
talked about our life cycles. Because, Walter, we are in this world and we've been in this world for 55 years plus.
Yep.
And so we have experienced about 6 life cycles
Yes,
in
we
the
have.
same
Yep.
world. And in every life cycle,
Wow.
Walter, we had to mature to be transformed. We had to mature to deal with what was happening.
As I said, pivot, right?
Right, we had to pivot.
Yep.
I love that. We had to pivot, Walter. In 5 life cycles, we had to pivot. But the world has still been the same.
Wow. You know what's interesting? when you start to look at all the generations, right? You have the traditionalists, which are sort of the senior citizens, which are our grandparents,
Yes.
actually.
Yes.
Actually, yeah, more like our grandparents and our parents.
Yes.
Baby boomers, of which we are.
Here we go.
Millennials or the Generation X.
Yes.
Right? I'm sorry,
Wow.
Generation X, and then millennials,
Millennials.
which are the Generation Ys.
Wow.
And now you have Generation Zs, right? And there's alphas that are now going up. Every generation has its challenges. And
Excellent.
those challenges are causing people to do things different.
There.
And it's impacting, but the interesting thing is that now there's so much more. Like, for instance, you have AI. AI is changing the universe. How these generations deal with that is something we're going to be talking about.
Yes. Yes.
We are going to be bringing in guests, right,
Yes,
that have certain expertise that Valerie and I don't have, and
That's
nor
right.
do we fake we're going to have.
That's right.
And we're going to share that with you. And then we're going to talk about topics that are not very sexy. We're going to talk about fentanyl. We're going to talk
Oh,
about.
yes.
We're going to talk
Yeah.
about people that are alcoholics. We're going to talk
Yes.
about drug addiction. We're going to talk about how people deal with people that have just passed, the
Yes,
mornings.
the morning.
So the intent here is to
Yes.
provide you with a broad range of topics that are going to
That's right.
hopefully excite you
Yes.
and keep us very engaged.
And as we close it, I know you're going to give them something to do, but you had mentioned AI and the changing, whatever is changing,
Landscape,
but the landscape. But what came to me is how do they deal with this whole social media?
Oh.
The AI, the Facebook, and a girlfriend of mine, she says, Valerie, I don't even know how you can be on Facebook. It's fake book. How could we really need to talk about that. Are people being transparent? How are they showing up in these spaces and places, Walter? Because are they authentic? And I did something, because I do the open door series concept, but I did something and I said that we need to be more transparent with ourselves as well, because that could be a block.
Yeah, but I will tell you though, and I'm going to use your term because that's something you have to unpack because that's a lot.
Oh my gosh.
Social media is a lot.
Yes.
Lots of what you see isn't real, but it's not real because the people that are putting it out have issues. And sometimes you mentioned the word authenticity.
Yes.
They're not authentic. And we, as the receivers of that information, we need to assess whether we want to receive it.
Wow.
Right? It's up to us.
Yes.
So
yes,
so
yes.
it really is a two-way street here.
Okay.
But those are just a few
Okay.
of what we're going to talk about. And for those of you that own small businesses or own corporations, we are going to talk about creating sales infrastructures.
Yes.
We are going to talk about the life cycle of hiring sales reps. We are going to talk about dealing with crises, right? Because that's one of your specialties.
Yes, yes.
We are going to talk about content that that I think you'll find valuable, impactful,
Yes.
and something you can immediately begin to change.
Yes, yes, I think that it's something. So is there anything that you want to leave them with? I mean, because I know, Walter, we're similar in that we like to give them something to do. We like to give them something to do.
So Valerie and I, after every podcast, we're going to try to leave you with what we call our, Valerie and Walter's call to action.
Call to action, okay.
And that call to action is you taking an inventory. And we're going to tell you for this one what we want you to take an inventory of. We want you to look through your journey, as Valerie and I will be talking about our journey, and we want you to share with us where some of your gaps are.
Wow,
Some of
that's
your
good.
gaps might be in the education you think you've received, right?
Yes.
Which it might be an issue for you, but not really an issue. Some of the gaps you might have within your family. Some of the gaps you might have within the corporations you all work with. Some of the gaps you might have with your friends and family, right? With your
Yes.
spouses.
Yes.
Share that with us.
Yes,
And
yeah.
what we're gonna, and actually, what I'm sorry, what I want you to do is take that inventory, look at that, and then share that information. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna try to provide you with content that can at least allow you
Yes.
to use that as a guide.
As a guide.
Does that
right.
work?
I think that works because I don't want anyone to think that our lives are perfect. That's
Oh.
not what we're saying. We just want to use our life journey and cycles as probably a benchmark to some
Yeah,
degree,
which is
or-
interesting. Which is interesting because you say that they might think our lives are perfect, and what we're using is more our failures as to how you shouldn't repeat what we've done,
That's exactly right.
done quite badly, and then redirected,
Redirected.
and now done it well.
Well, okay. So I think that's great, and Walter, I can't wait to talk about these here failures, and I might, it starts to get kind of vulnerable.
Absolutely.
When
Well, that's
we
the intent, right?
That's the intent, right? Because there's one that I'm going to talk about that people are probably going to say, Valerie, I can't believe it, and it's my education. All right. I think I have like 3 masters, Walter, and then I have a doctoral degree, and then I have, and I had a friend who just recently told me, you're always in school, you're always in school. And when I was speaking with another friend, she said, Valerie, you're always in school. I mean, I love learning. Walter, you open up your institution, I'm going to applaud. I'm just going to go because there's something there I can learn. But there's something with that with me.
Which is interesting, right? Mine,
Yeah.
It's funny.
Yeah.
Mine is actually there's a few, and again, we don't
Yeah.
want to be very very vulnerable. Well, actually, we do want to be vulnerable.
Mm-hmm.
And there are certain companies that I've worked for, which quite frankly, I should have been there. And we'll talk about that. And I will tell you that my best transition was
Wow.
when I started my own company.
See?
And
Wow.
again, we'll talk about that struggle because that was not easy.
Yes.
The art of dealing with partners is not easy.
Yes.
So that will be part of the conversation.
Yes.
And again, this is for you all.
Yes, it
And
is.
Valerie and I will make it fun.
Yes.
Because I'll tell you, based on being together for 55 years, I know a lot of stories.
Oh my gosh.
And what we're going to try to do
Yeah.
is, while we're making it fun
Yeah.
and while we're making it entertaining, making it valuable.
Yes, making it valuable.
Right.
Okay.
So I'm Walter Santiago.
And I'm Valerie Small, and we are,
Next phase, next steps.
here we go.